At exactly 6:47 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning, a billionaire sat alone in his penthouse overlooking the city, staring at a bank alert he never expected to see. His hands were shaking. Not because the money was gone, but because of how it was spent. 24 hours earlier, he had done something his lawyers called insane, his financial advisors called reckless, and his friends called a midlife crisis. He had handed his unlimited credit card to a complete stranger. A woman the world barely noticed. A poor single mother struggling to survive in a system that had forgotten she existed. No savings. No safety net. No second chances. He told her she could spend as much as she wanted. Anything. Everything. No questions asked. No judgment. No limits. What she did instead would break something inside him that money had never touched. It would shatter every assumption he had about human nature, about poverty, about dignity, and about what people become when they finally have the power to choose. And by the end of this story, you may never look at wealth, kindness, or human character the same way again. Because what happened in those 24 hours wasn't just unexpected. It was impossible to predict. And the truth, the real truth behind what this woman did, only reveals itself at the very end. Stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about money. It's about what happens when someone who has been invisible their entire life suddenly becomes seen. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And also drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Are you in New York? US? South Africa? London? Manila? We want to know who's part of this community. Now let's get into how this began. Because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after this video ends. Who was this woman, really? What kind of life had she lived that led her to this moment? Why would a billionaire risk everything on a stranger he met only once? And what kind of choices does a person make when given unlimited power for just 24 hours? Would she buy luxury? Designer clothes? A new car? Would she settle old scores? Get revenge on people who had wronged her? Would she disappear, start a new life somewhere far away where no one knew her name? Or would she do something no one expected? Because this was never just about money. It was about character. It was about who we are when no one is watching. Who we become when the chains of poverty are removed, even if just for a day. And the answer to that question, the real answer, challenges everything our society believes about poor people, about desperation, and about what people will do when they finally have a chance. The billionaire thought he knew. He thought he had seen enough of human nature to predict what would happen. He was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. And what this woman did with that card would force him to confront a truth he had spent his entire life avoiding. His name was Jonathan Hale. At 62 years old, Jonathan had everything people dream of having. Private jets that could take him anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. Oceanfront homes in 3 different countries. A penthouse in Manhattan that cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. A fortune built from nothing, from the ground up, through decades of ruthless business decisions and calculated risks that had paid off beyond his wildest imagination. Forbes estimated his net worth at $3.7 billion. But behind the polished suits, the magazine covers, the interviews on financial news networks, and the charity galas where he smiled for cameras, was a man quietly exhausted by his own success. A man who had discovered too late that winning doesn't always feel like winning. Jonathan had lost his wife, Catherine, to cancer 10 years earlier. She had been 51 years old. They had met in college, before the money, before the empire, when he was just a kid with big dreams and she was the only person who believed he could achieve them. She had stood by him through the failed startups, the bankruptcy, the years of eating ramen noodles and sleeping on an air mattress because they couldn't afford a real bed. And then, when the success finally came, when the money started flowing in like a flood they couldn't control, she was the one who kept him grounded. Who reminded him where he came from? Who made sure he never forgot what it felt like to struggle? When she died, something inside Jonathan died with her. His only son, Michael, hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. Their relationship had collapsed after a fight about money, about legacy, about what Jonathan expected from him. Michael had wanted to be an artist. Jonathan had wanted him to join the company. The argument had escalated. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Michael had walked out of Jonathan's office and never returned. Jonathan had tried to reach out. Emails. Phone calls. Letters. All ignored. The silence was deafening. Money solved problems. Jonathan knew that better than anyone. But it never filled empty chairs at dinner. It never answered when you called out in the middle of the night. It never hugged you back. Jonathan often wondered, if money is so powerful, why does it feel so useless when it comes to the things that actually matter? He had spent decades building empires, closing deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, shaking hands with presidents and CEOs, being photographed with celebrities and politicians. But at night, when the office lights went dark and the assistants went home and the city below his penthouse window began to quiet, he sat in silence. The kind of silence that money can't buy its way out of. The kind that reminds you that success and fulfillment are not the same thing. The kind that whispers in your ear that you've won the game but lost yourself in the process. Jonathan had started asking himself questions he had never had time for before. What is wealth actually for? What does it mean to have everything and feel empty? What separates a rich man from a good man? He began reading philosophy, something he had never had time for during his climb to the top. Marcus Aurelius. Seneca. Epictetus. Ancient wisdom about virtue, about character, about what it means to live well. And the more he read, the more he realized how far he had drifted from the person he had once wanted to be. He started noticing things he had never noticed before. The way his driver never complained, even when Jonathan changed plans at the last minute. The way the cleaning staff in his building worked invisibly, arriving before dawn and leaving after dark, making sure everything was perfect for people who never acknowledged their existence. The way the barista at his favorite coffee shop remembered his order but he had never asked her name. He was surrounded by people, but he had never really seen them. They were functions. Roles. Part of the machinery of his life. But they weren't real to him. Not in the way that mattered. And that realization haunted him. Her name was Maria Thompson. She was 38 years old, though people often thought she looked older. Exhaustion has a way of aging you that time alone cannot. She was a single mother of 2 children, Eli, age 9, and Grace, age 6. They were her entire world. Everything she did, every decision she made, every sacrifice she endured, was for them. Maria's husband, David, had died in a construction accident 7 years earlier. He had been working on a high-rise downtown. 12 stories up. The scaffolding collapsed. 3 men died that day. David was one of them. He was 32 years old. There had been no life insurance. David's company claimed it was contractor negligence. The contractor claimed it was the company's fault. The lawsuits dragged on for years. Maria never saw a penny. No warning. No goodbye. Just a phone call from a hospital telling her to come immediately, and then a doctor with sad eyes telling her there was nothing they could do. Maria remembered standing in that hospital hallway, Eli pulling at her sleeve asking where Daddy was, Grace asleep in her arms, and feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Everything that came after that moment was survival. Since then, Maria worked 2 jobs. During the day, she worked at a grocery store, scanning items, bagging purchases, smiling at customers who rarely smiled back. Minimum wage. No benefits. No security. At night, after she put her children to bed, after she helped Eli with his homework and read Grace a story and kissed them both goodnight, she went to her second job cleaning offices downtown. She worked from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m., mopping floors, emptying trash cans, scrubbing toilets, making sure everything was spotless for the people who would arrive in the morning and never think about who had cleaned up after them. She would get home around 3:30, sleep for 2 hours, wake up at 5:30 to get the kids ready for school, drop them off, and then head to the grocery store to do it all over again. This had been her life for 7 years. 7 years of running on empty. 7 years of choosing between electricity and groceries. 7 years of skipping meals so her children could eat. She had become an expert in invisibility. She knew how to move through the world without being noticed, without being a burden, without asking for help. Because asking for help meant admitting you were failing. And Maria couldn't afford to fail. Her children depended on her. She smiled so they wouldn't worry. Every morning, no matter how tired she was, no matter how much her body ached, no matter how close she was to breaking, she put on a smile for Eli and Grace. She made them breakfast. She asked about their dreams. She told them stories. She made them believe that everything was okay, that they were safe, that the future was bright. And every night, after they slept, after she was sure they couldn't hear her, she cried quietly into a pillow. She cried from exhaustion. She cried from loneliness. She cried from the weight of carrying everything alone. But by morning, the tears were gone, and the smile was back. Maria had learned to live in a constant state of calculation. Every dollar had a purpose. Every purchase was a negotiation with survival. When Eli needed new shoes because his toes were pushing through the front of his old ones, she waited until payday. When Grace asked for a birthday cake, Maria baked it herself from the cheapest ingredients she could find. When the car broke down, she learned to take the bus, even though it added 2 hours to her commute. When the landlord raised the rent, she picked up extra shifts. There was always a way. There had to be. Because the alternative was unthinkable. Maria never complained. Not to her kids. Not to her coworkers. Not even to herself, really. Because complaining felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Complaining required energy she didn't have. Complaining required believing that someone was listening, that someone cared, that things could be different. And Maria had stopped believing that a long time ago. She had learned that the world doesn't stop for your pain. It doesn't slow down because you're tired. It doesn't care that you're doing your best. It just keeps moving, and you either keep up or you get left behind. So she kept moving. One foot in front of the other. One day at a time. She had dreams once. Before David died. Before everything fell apart. She had wanted to be a teacher. She had been 2 semesters away from her degree when David's accident happened. She had to drop out. Couldn't afford tuition. Couldn't afford childcare. Couldn't afford to not work. The dreams got packed away, like the wedding photos she couldn't look at anymore, like David's clothes she couldn't bring herself to donate. They were still there, somewhere in the back of a closet, but they belonged to a different person. A person who had the luxury of dreaming. But even in her exhaustion, even in her invisibility, Maria had something that couldn't be taken from her. Dignity. She refused to be bitter. She refused to teach her children that the world owed them something. She refused to let poverty turn her into someone she wasn't. When she saw homeless people on the street, she gave them whatever spare change she had, even though she barely had enough for herself. When her neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, needed help carrying groceries up the stairs, Maria helped her, even when her own arms were full. When the teenager who bagged groceries at her store looked sad, Maria asked if he was okay, even though she had her own problems to worry about. These small acts of kindness cost her nothing but time, and time was the one thing she didn't have. But she did them anyway. Because she believed that who you are isn't determined by what you have. It's determined by what you do when no one is watching. And Maria, invisible as she was always watching herself. Their worlds collided on a rainy afternoon in late October. It was the kind of rain that soaks through your clothes in seconds, cold and relentless. Maria had just finished her shift at the grocery store. She was tired. Her feet hurt. She had 3 hours before she needed to pick up the kids from her neighbor who watched them after school, and then another hour before she had to leave for her night shift. She stopped at a small cafe, not to buy anything, but to use the restroom and maybe sit for a few minutes in the warmth. On her way out, she tried to juggle her umbrella, her purse, and 2 plastic bags of groceries she had bought with her employee discount. Bread. Peanut butter. A carton of milk. Apples. The basics. But the bags were cheap, and one of them tore. Cans rolled across the wet pavement. The milk carton hit the ground and split open, white liquid mixing with rainwater. An apple rolled into the gutter. Maria's umbrella fell. She stood there for a moment, frozen, watching her groceries scatter, feeling something inside her crack. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a small, quiet break in whatever was holding her together. People walked past. They had places to be. Things to do. Problems of their own. A woman in heels stepped over a can of beans without looking down. A man in a suit sidestepped the milk puddle and kept talking on his phone. A teenager with headphones walked by without even noticing. Maria knelt down in the rain, trying to salvage what she could, mentally calculating how much of this week's grocery budget she had just lost. And then someone knelt beside her. She looked up. It was a man, older, maybe in his 60s. Expensive coat. Nice shoes. The kind of person who didn't usually stop for things like this. But he was stopping. He picked up a can. Then another. He chased down the apple that had rolled into the gutter. He moved with a kind of careful attention, as if this mattered, as if she mattered. When everything was gathered, when the salvageable items were placed in Maria's remaining bag, he looked at her. Really looked at her. Not the way people usually looked at her, with pity or judgment or that uncomfortable mixture of both. But the way you look at someone you recognize. Someone familiar. Maria thanked him. 3 times. Too many times. The way people do when they're not used to being helped. She started to walk away, but he said something that stopped her. Excuse me. I don't mean to be intrusive, but are you okay? It was a simple question. The kind people ask without expecting an honest answer. But something in his voice made Maria pause. She turned back. Looked at him again. There was something in his eyes. Something sad. Something searching. She almost told him the truth. Almost said no, I'm not okay, I haven't been okay in 7 years, I'm drowning and no one can see it. But instead, she did what she always did. She smiled. I'm fine. Just clumsy. Thank you for your help. He nodded slowly, but he didn't look convinced. I'm Jonathan, he said, extending his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. Maria. They stood there in the rain for a moment, 2 strangers who somehow felt less strange than they should. And then Jonathan did something unexpected. He asked if she had a few minutes to talk. Offered to buy her a coffee. Replaced the groceries she'd lost. Maria's first instinct was to say no. To politely decline. To maintain the distance between his world and hers. But something made her say yes. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the fact that someone had actually stopped. Had actually seen her. They went back into the cafe. He ordered her a coffee. Asked if she wanted something to eat. She said no, just the coffee was fine. He ordered her a sandwich anyway. They talked for 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. But sometimes, 10 minutes is enough to change 2 lives forever. Jonathan asked about her life. Not in the way people usually asked, with that performative curiosity that's really just politeness. But genuinely. Like he actually wanted to know. And Maria, tired and raw and caught off guard by his kindness, told him. Not everything. But enough. About David. About the kids. About working 2 jobs. About trying to keep it all together. She didn't cry. She had learned not to cry in front of people. But her voice cracked once, when she mentioned that Eli needed glasses and she was trying to save up for them. Jonathan listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He didn't do that thing people do where they try to fix your problems with empty platitudes. He just listened. And when she finished, when she apologized for talking too much, for taking up his time, for being a burden, he shook his head. You're not a burden, he said quietly. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Maria didn't know what to say to that. So she just nodded. Finished her coffee. Thanked him again. And left. She thought that would be the end of it. A brief moment of kindness from a stranger. Something to remember on hard days. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The next day, Maria received a phone call. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She was at work, in the middle of her shift at the grocery store, scanning items for a customer who was yelling at her about an expired coupon. But something made her step away during her break and listen to the voicemail. It was Jonathan. He apologized for tracking down her number, explained that he had asked the cafe owner if he knew her, and the owner had recognized her description and shared her contact information from a delivery order she'd placed months ago. He wanted to meet again. Had something to discuss. Could she spare an hour? Maria's first thought was that this was strange. Maybe even concerning. Why would a wealthy stranger want to meet with her again? What could he possibly want to discuss? But there was something in his voice. Something sincere. And after 7 years of being invisible, after 7 years of no one caring, the fact that someone wanted to see her again felt significant. So she agreed. They met at the same cafe the next evening. Maria had arranged for her neighbor to watch the kids for an extra hour. She was anxious. Couldn't figure out what this was about. When she arrived, Jonathan was already there, sitting at a corner table. He stood when he saw her. Pulled out her chair. Ordered her coffee without asking what she wanted, because he remembered from last time. These small gestures of attention felt foreign to Maria. She had forgotten what it felt like to be considered. Jonathan didn't waste time. He told her he'd been thinking about their conversation. About her situation. About how many people like her existed in the world, invisible and exhausted, working themselves to death and barely surviving. He said he'd spent his entire life accumulating wealth but had recently realized he didn't understand the first thing about what it meant to truly need something. To truly struggle. And then he said something that made Maria's heart skip. I want to do an experiment. And I'd like your help. Maria waited. Jonathan pulled out a black credit card. Placed it on the table between them. For the next 24 hours, this card is yours. No limits. No tracking. No questions asked. Spend it however you want. Maria laughed. Not because it was funny. But because it was absurd. She thought he was joking. Some kind of social experiment for a documentary she hadn't agreed to be part of. But Jonathan's eyes were serious. Completely serious. I'm not joking, he said. I want to see what someone with nothing does when given everything, even if just for a day. I want to understand. And I want you to have this opportunity. Maria's hands started to shake. She looked at the card. Looked at him. Looked back at the card. I don't understand. Why me? Why would you do this? Jonathan leaned forward. Because yesterday, in the rain, when your groceries fell and everyone walked past, you didn't get angry. You didn't curse. You didn't blame anyone. You just knelt down and tried to fix it. And when I helped you, you thanked me like I'd given you the world, when all I did was pick up a can of beans. That told me something about who you are. And I want to know if I'm right. Maria's mind was racing. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen. Not to people like her. Not in real life. What's the catch? She asked. There's no catch, Jonathan said. 24 hours. Starting now. When the time is up, the card deactivates. Whatever you've spent is spent. Whatever you haven't is returned to my account. I won't judge you. I won't track what you buy. I just want to know what you choose to do. Maria stared at the card. It looked like a piece of plastic. But it represented something else. Power. Choice. Freedom. Things she hadn't had in 7 years. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes, Jonathan replied. And after a long moment, after 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, after considering every possible angle and still not understanding why this was happening, Maria reached out and picked up the card. Her hands were trembling. Her heart was pounding. Okay, she said. Yes. Jonathan smiled. Not a triumphant smile. But a sad one. Like he was hoping for something he wasn't sure he'd find. 24 hours, he repeated. Starting now. He stood up. Shook her hand. And left. Maria sat alone at the table, staring at the black card in her hand, feeling like she'd just stepped into a dream she didn't know how to navigate. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm still here. Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Because what happens next, what Maria does with this card, is going to change everything you think you know about human nature. And I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to see the world differently. So stay with me. We're just getting started. Maria didn't sleep that night. She sat at her small kitchen table, the black card in front of her, staring at it like it might disappear if she looked away. 24 hours. She kept repeating it in her mind. 24 hours of unlimited access to money. She thought about all the things she could do. All the things she had dreamed about during those long nights when she couldn't sleep, when the weight of bills and responsibilities pressed down on her chest like a physical thing. She could pay off her debt. 3 years of back rent she owed her landlord, Mr. Callahan, who had been kind enough not to evict her but who she knew was struggling himself. She could buy a car. Something reliable. Something that wouldn't break down and leave her stranded. She could take her kids somewhere. Disneyland. The beach. Somewhere they could be children instead of little adults who understood too much about sacrifice. She could buy herself something. New clothes. Shoes without holes. A meal at a nice restaurant where someone served her for once. But underneath all of these thoughts was something else. Something deeper. A question she couldn't shake. Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when I have the power to choose? What does this moment reveal about me? At 5:30 in the morning, Maria woke her children. Eli stumbled out of bed, rubbing his eyes. Grace clung to her stuffed bunny, still half asleep. Maria made them breakfast. Eggs. Toast. The last of the milk that hadn't spilled yesterday. She watched them eat, these two beautiful humans who had inherited a life they didn't choose, and she made her first decision. We're going to the doctor today, she said. Eli looked up, concerned. Are we sick? No, baby. We're just going to make sure everything is okay. Get checkups. Like we're supposed to. Grace perked up. Will I get a sticker? Maria smiled. You'll get all the stickers. The clinic opened at 8. Maria had called ahead, explained she needed appointments for both kids, and asked if they could fit her in today. The receptionist had been hesitant until Maria said she could pay in full, immediately. Suddenly, there were openings. That's how the world works, Maria thought. Money doesn't just buy things. It buys access. It buys attention. It buys dignity. They arrived at the clinic at 7:50. The waiting room was clean, bright, filled with toys and children's books. Eli and Grace had never been to a place like this. Their previous checkups had been at a free clinic across town, where the wait times were 4 hours and the doctors were overworked and exhausted. A nurse called them back. Took their vitals. Asked questions about their medical history. Maria answered honestly. No, they hadn't been to a dentist in 2 years. No, Eli didn't have glasses even though his teacher said he was squinting. No, Grace's cough hadn't been checked out. Yes, Maria knew these things were important. Yes, she had meant to do something about it. The nurse didn't judge. Just took notes. The doctor came in. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands. She examined Eli first. Listened to his heart. Checked his throat. His ears. His eyes. He definitely needs glasses, she said. His vision is significantly impaired. I'm surprised he's been managing at school. Maria felt a stab of guilt. I know. I've been trying to save up. The doctor nodded. Well, let's get him fitted today. We have an optometrist in the building. She examined Grace next. The cough was bronchitis. Mild, but it needed antibiotics. The doctor prescribed medication. Then she said something that made Maria's throat tighten. When was the last time you had a checkup? Maria blinked. Me? Yes. You look exhausted. When was your last physical? Maria couldn't remember. Before David died, probably. 7 years ago. It's been a while. Let's do one today. While we're at it. And so Maria found herself being examined. Blood pressure high. Iron levels low. Signs of chronic stress and exhaustion. The doctor recommended tests. Blood work. A full panel. Maria agreed to all of it. By the time they left the clinic, 4 hours had passed. Eli had new glasses. He put them on and gasped. Mom, I can see the leaves on the trees. Maria cried right there in the parking lot. Grace had antibiotics and 3 stickers. Maria had a stack of prescriptions and a follow-up appointment scheduled. The bill was presented at the front desk. Maria looked at the number. $4,732. For one morning. For basic healthcare that should have been accessible years ago. She handed them the black card. It went through without a question. The receptionist smiled and thanked her. Maria felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly. But relief. The relief of knowing her children were being cared for. That they weren't falling through the cracks. That she hadn't failed them. They went to the pharmacy. Picked up the medications. Another $340. Maria paid without hesitation. They got lunch at a small diner. Burgers and fries. Milkshakes. Grace's eyes went wide when Maria said she could order dessert. Really? Really, really? Really, really? They ate slowly, savoring every bite. Eli kept taking off his glasses and putting them back on, amazed at the clarity. Grace sang a song she'd learned at school. And Maria watched them, memorizing this moment, storing it away for the hard days she knew would come again. After lunch, Maria took the kids back to her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched them in the afternoons. She explained she had some errands to run and would be back before dinner. Mrs. Chen, a 72-year-old widow who had immigrated from Taiwan 40 years ago, smiled and waved the kids inside. "Take your time, dear. They're always good." Maria hugged her. Mrs. Chen had been a lifeline over the years. She never asked for payment. Just said she enjoyed the company. Maria had always felt guilty about that. About taking advantage of someone's kindness because she had no other choice. Today, she could do something about it. But first, she had another stop to make. She drove to her apartment building. Parked in front. Looked up at the fourth-floor window where they lived. The building was old. 70 years, at least. The kind of place developers wanted to tear down and replace with something modern and expensive. The kind of place where poor people lived because it was all they could afford. Her landlord, Mr. Callahan, was a 68-year-old man who had inherited the building from his father. He charged below market rent. He fixed things himself when they broke. He pretended not to notice when Maria was late on payments. He was a good man in a world that didn't reward good men. Maria walked to his office on the first floor. Knocked on the door. He opened it, surprised to see her. "Maria? Everything okay? Is the sink acting up again?" "No, Mr. Callahan. Everything's fine. I actually wanted to talk to you about the rent." His face fell. He probably thought she was going to ask for more time. More patience. But instead, Maria pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check she'd written at the bank an hour ago. For $18,000. 3 years of back rent, plus 6 months in advance. Mr. Callahan stared at it. Looked at her. Looked back at the check. "Maria, I don't understand. Where did you?" "I came into some money," Maria said simply. "And I wanted to make things right. You've been so kind to us. You never made me feel like a burden. This is me saying thank you." Mr. Callahan's eyes filled with tears. He tried to hand the check back. "I can't take this. You need this money. Your kids." "My kids are fine," Maria interrupted gently. "And this is important to me. Please." He took the check with shaking hands. Then he did something unexpected. He hugged her. This old man who smelled like coffee and old books hugged her tightly and said, "Your husband would be so proud of you." Maria cried then. Because she hoped that was true. Because she had been carrying the weight of David's absence for so long, wondering if she was doing enough, being enough, managing the impossible task of being two parents in one body. She left Mr. Callahan's office feeling lighter. Next, she went to the hardware store. Bought supplies. Paint. Brushes. Sealant. Materials to fix the leaking ceiling in their bathroom, something Mr. Callahan had promised to get to but never had time for. She also bought materials to repair the ceiling in Mrs. Chen's apartment. And the apartment of Mr. Patterson, a veteran who lived on the second floor and whose window had been broken for 6 months. She hired a contractor on the spot. Paid him $3,000 cash to do all the repairs that day. He looked at her like she was crazy, but he took the job. By evening, when she picked up the kids from Mrs. Chen's apartment, the work was already underway. Mrs. Chen was confused, standing in her living room watching a stranger patch her ceiling. "Maria? Did you do this?" Maria smiled. "You've done so much for me. Let me do this for you." Mrs. Chen cried. Hugged her. Said blessings in Mandarin that Maria didn't understand but felt in her heart. When they got home, their own bathroom was being repaired. Eli and Grace watched in amazement as the contractor sealed the leak, repainted the ceiling, fixed the loose tile. "Mom, how did you afford this?" Eli asked. Maria knelt down to his level. "Remember how I told you that sometimes, when you work really hard and try to be a good person, good things come back to you?" He nodded. "Well, today is one of those days." And we're going to use this blessing to help not just us, but other people too. Okay. Okay, Eli said, though he didn't fully understand. But he would. Someday. When he was older and life had taught him about struggle and kindness and the responsibility that comes with having enough. Maria made dinner for her kids. Spaghetti. Garlic bread. A salad with fresh vegetables she had actually been able to buy without calculating every penny. They ate together at their small table, Grace chattering about school, Eli showing off how well he could see with his new glasses. After dinner, Maria read them stories. Tucked them into bed. Kissed their foreheads. Whispered that she loved them. And then, when they were asleep, when the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic, Maria sat down with the black card and a notebook. She made a list. She had spent approximately $26,000 so far. Medical care. Rent. Repairs. Necessary things. Overdue things. But not indulgent things. She had money left. A lot of money. Unlimited, Jonathan had said. She could do anything. She looked around her small apartment. At the second-hand furniture. The cracked walls. The windows that didn't close quite right. She could move. Find a better place. Somewhere safe. Somewhere with a yard where the kids could play. She could buy a house. She had always dreamed of owning a home. Something that was theirs. That couldn't be taken away. But something stopped her. A memory. 7 years ago, right after David died, when Maria had nothing and didn't know how she would survive. She had gone to a food bank. Had stood in line with other desperate people, feeling ashamed and grateful in equal measure. A woman named Sharon ran the food bank. She had been kind. Had packed extra food. Had included diapers and formula without being asked. Had looked Maria in the eye and said, "You're going to be okay. I promise." Maria had never forgotten that. Had never forgotten what it felt like to be seen in your lowest moment and treated with dignity instead of pity. And she had promised herself that if she ever had enough, if she ever got to a place where she wasn't drowning, she would pay it forward. She grabbed her coat. Left a note for the kids in case they woke up, though they never did once they were asleep. And she drove across town to the food bank. It was closed, but she knew Sharon lived in the apartment above it. Maria had delivered donated goods there once, years ago. She knocked on the door. Waited. A light came on. Sharon answered, still in her robe, confused to see someone at this hour. "Maria? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Maria said. "I'm sorry to bother you so late. But I have something for you." She handed Sharon an envelope. Inside was a check for $30,000. Sharon opened it. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Maria, what is this? I don't understand." "It's for the food bank. For the women who come in scared. The ones who think they'll never get out. The ones like I was. Use it to help them. Buy more food. Pay someone's rent. Whatever you think will make the biggest difference." Sharon was shaking. "I can't accept this. This is too much. You need this money." "I did need it," Maria said softly. 7 years ago, I needed it desperately. And you gave me food and dignity when I had neither. This is me saying thank you. And making sure the next woman who walks through your door gets the same chance you gave me." Sharon pulled Maria into a tight hug. They stood there in the doorway, two women who understood what it meant to fall and what it took to get back up. When Maria finally pulled away, Sharon was crying. "You're an angel. Do you know that?" Maria shook her head. "I'm just someone who remembers. And who wants to make sure forgetting isn't an option." She left before Sharon could ask more questions. Got back in her car. Sat in the darkness for a moment. She had now spent $56,000. Still not extravagant. Still not selfish. But purposeful. Intentional. Every dollar had gone to repairing something broken. Not just physically broken, but systemically broken. The fact that healthcare was a luxury. That housing was precarious. That food wasn't guaranteed. That people fell through cracks no one bothered to seal. Maria drove to the women's shelter next. The place where she had spent 3 months after David died, when she couldn't afford rent and had nowhere else to go. The building looked the same. Tired. Underfunded. Doing its best with not enough. She walked in. The night attendant looked up, surprised to see anyone at this hour. "Can I help you?" "I'd like to make a donation," Maria said. She wrote another check. $25,000 this time. Handed it to the attendant. "Please give this to the director. Tell her it's from someone who stayed here once and never forgot the kindness she received." The attendant stared at the check. "This is real. It's real. Use it for whatever the women here need most." Maria left before there could be questions. Before there could be gratitude that would make her uncomfortable. Because this wasn't about recognition. It was about repair. It was nearly 11 p.m. now. Maria had been awake for almost 18 hours. She was exhausted, but she couldn't stop. Because the clock was ticking. She had 7 more hours. 7 more hours of power. Of choice. Of the ability to make a difference. She drove through the city, looking at it with new eyes. She saw the homeless man sleeping under the bridge. The teenager sitting alone at the bus stop, looking scared. The elderly woman pushing a shopping cart full of her belongings. She saw the invisible people. The ones she used to be. The ones she could so easily become again if circumstances shifted. Maria stopped at an ATM, withdrew the maximum allowed in cash. $2,000. Then she drove around, handing out $100 bills to people on the streets. She didn't make a show of it. Didn't film it. Didn't ask for their stories. She just handed them the money and said, "This is for you." No strings attached. Most people were suspicious at first. Thought it was a trick. But Maria's face, tired and honest, convinced them. One man, probably in his 50s, started crying when she handed him $500. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because someone gave me a chance once," Maria said. "And I want you to have one too." She spent $10,000 that way. $10,000 distributed to people who had nothing. Who weren't asking for handouts but who desperately needed them. Who had fallen through every safety net society claimed to provide. By midnight, Maria had spent $91,000. She sat in her car, parked outside a 24-hour diner, and took stock. She wasn't buying luxury. Wasn't indulging fantasies. She was doing something else entirely. She was using wealth the way it was supposed to be used. To create dignity. To repair harm. To redistribute resources from someone who had everything to people who had nothing. But there was more she wanted to do. She thought about education. About how many kids like Eli were sitting in classrooms, unable to see the board, falling behind not because they weren't smart but because they lacked resources. She called the principal of Eli's school. Left a voicemail. Said she wanted to make an anonymous donation to cover vision screenings and glasses for any student who needed them. That she would call back in the morning to arrange the details. Then she thought about the other parents at the school. The ones she saw at pickup, who looked as tired as she felt. Who were working multiple jobs. Who were one emergency away from catastrophe. She couldn't fix everything. But she could fix something. In the morning, she would set up a fund. An emergency fund for families at the school. For when the car breaks down. For when someone loses their job. For when medical bills pile up. For all the small disasters that become catastrophic when you have no cushion. She calculated. $50,000 should be enough to help at least 20 families. Maybe more if managed carefully. Maria went into the diner. Ordered coffee. Sat in a booth by the window. The waitress, a woman about Maria's age with a name tag that said, Denise, brought the coffee and asked if she wanted anything to eat. Maria looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the exhaustion. The smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. The way she moved with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this for too long. How long have you been working today? Maria asked. Denise laughed tiredly. Since 2 this afternoon. I'll be here until 6 a.m. double shift. Rent's due tomorrow and I'm short. Maria nodded. She knew that desperation. That calculation. That feeling of running as fast as you can and still falling behind. She pulled out $100 bills. Placed them on the table. This is for you. Not a tip for the coffee. Just for you. For whatever you need. Denise stared at the money. I can't take this. That's too much. You can, Maria said gently. And you should. Because you're working yourself to death and you deserve better. Take it. Pay your rent. Take a day off. Breathe. Denise's eyes filled with tears. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. I don't need to know you, Maria said. I know what it feels like to be where you are. And I know what a difference a little help can make. So please. Take it. Denise took the money with shaking hands. She sat down across from Maria, which she probably wasn't supposed to do during her shift, and cried. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. No idea. But Maria did know. She knew exactly. At 2 in the morning, Maria drove to the offices she cleaned every night. She was supposed to be there. Her shift started at 10, and she was already 4 hours late. She had called her supervisor earlier, said she had a family emergency, knowing she would probably be written up or possibly fired. But tonight wasn't about keeping her night job. Tonight was about something else. She parked in the usual spot. Took the service elevator to the 12th floor. Let herself in with her key. The offices were dark and quiet. She walked through the halls she had cleaned hundreds of times. Past the cubicles where people sat during the day, doing work she didn't fully understand. Past the corner offices with the big windows and the expensive furniture. She had spent so many nights here. Making things perfect for people who never saw her. Who never said thank you. Who left their messes for her to clean up. Not all of them. Some of the employees were kind. Left notes saying thank you. Didn't make unnecessary messes. But most of them never thought about who cleaned up after them. Never considered that the person scrubbing their toilet was a human being with dreams and struggles and a life that mattered. Maria sat down at one of the desks. Turned on the computer. Googled the name of the cleaning company she worked for. Found the owner's contact information. And wrote an email. Dear Mr. Patterson, my name is Maria Thompson. I've worked as a night cleaner for your company for 5 years. I'm writing to let you know that I'm resigning, effective immediately. But I'm also writing to tell you something important. The people who work for you, the cleaners, the janitors, the people who make these buildings function, are underpaid, overworked, and invisible. We work while everyone else sleeps. We do the jobs no one else wants to do. And we do them with dignity because we have no other choice. I'm attaching a check for $100,000. I want you to use this money to give every single one of your employees a raise. A significant raise. Not a token gesture, but enough to make a real difference in their lives. And I want you to provide health insurance. Real health insurance, not the bare minimum. These people deserve it. They've earned it. If you choose not to do this, if you pocket this money or use it for something else, then I hope you understand that you're part of the problem. You're perpetuating a system that keeps people trapped in poverty while pretending their labor doesn't matter. Do better. Sincerely, Maria Thompson. She printed the email. Attached a check she had written at the bank earlier. Put both in an envelope. Left it on Mr. Patterson's desk. She didn't know if he would do what she asked. Didn't know if the money would actually go to the workers. But she had tried. She had used her temporary power to advocate for people who had no power. And sometimes, that's all you can do. Maria walked through the offices one last time. Said goodbye to a job that had kept her afloat but had also slowly drowned her. She took the elevator down. Walked out into the cold night air. And felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not permanent freedom. She would need to find another job. Would need to figure out how to survive when this 24 hours ended. But for now, for this moment, she was free. She drove to a park near her apartment. Parked the car. Sat on a bench. The city was quiet at this hour. Just the sound of distant traffic and wind through the trees. She thought about David. Wondered what he would think of all this. Would he be proud? Would he understand? She liked to think he would. David had always been generous. Even when they had nothing, he found ways to help people. He believed that character was measured not by what you had, but by what you did with it. And Maria had spent this entire day, this impossible, surreal day, trying to live up to that belief. Trying to be someone he would be proud of. Someone her kids would be proud of. Someone she could be proud of. At 4 a.m, Maria went home. Checked on her kids. They were still asleep. Eli was sprawled across his bed, one arm hanging off the side. Grace was curled up with her bunny, peaceful and perfect. Maria sat on the edge of Grace's bed and watched her breathe. In and out. In and out. The steady rhythm of life continuing. She had 3 hours left. 3 hours before the card deactivated and her temporary power disappeared. She had spent approximately $191,000. Medical care. Rent. Repairs. Donations. Direct aid. Worker advocacy. All of it necessary. All of it meaningful. But there was still more she could do. Maria thought about the future. About Eli and Grace growing up in a world that was stacked against them. About education being the one true path out of poverty, but a path that was increasingly expensive and inaccessible. She couldn't change the system. But she could give her children a chance. She went to her laptop. Opened it. Searched for information about 529 college savings plans. Read about how they worked. How money could grow tax-free if used for education. She created accounts for both Eli and Grace. Funded each one with $50,000. $100,000 total, invested in their futures. It wasn't enough to pay for college entirely, not with how expensive education had become. But it was a start. It was a foundation. It was a message to her children that their dreams mattered. That education mattered. That they had options. Then Maria did something she had been avoiding all day. She thought about herself. Not about what she needed to survive. But about what she wanted. What she had pushed down and ignored because wanting things felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. She thought about teaching. About the degree she had abandoned when David died. About the career she had dreamed of having. She researched programs. Found an online teaching certification program designed for working adults. It would take 2 years. Cost $30,000. She could do it on her own schedule. From home. While still working. She enrolled. Paid the full tuition up front. And cried. Because for the first time in 7 years, she had invested in herself. Not out of selfishness, but out of recognition that she mattered too. That her dreams weren't less important than everyone else's needs. That she could be both a mother and a person with aspirations. Both a survivor and someone reaching for more. She had spent $271,000 now. She checked the time. It was 5:30 in the morning. 90 minutes left. Maria made coffee. Sat at her kitchen table with a notebook. Made a list of every other thing she could think of that needed fixing, that needed funding, that needed attention. The local library that was threatening to close due to budget cuts. She donated $25,000. The after-school program that Grace attended, where underpaid teachers watched kids whose parents worked late. Another $25,000. The community center that offered free meals to elderly residents. $20,000. A scholarship fund at the local high school for students who wanted to pursue vocational training. $30,000. Each donation was intentional. Each one addressed a gap she had seen in the community. A place where people were falling through cracks because society had decided their needs weren't profitable enough to matter. By 6:30, she had spent $371,000. She sat back. Looked at the card. She could keep going. Could spend more. Could find more causes, more people, more problems to solve. But something made her stop. She thought about Jonathan. About why he had done this. About what he was trying to learn. And she realized that this wasn't really about how much she spent. It was about who she revealed herself to be when given the opportunity. She had revealed someone who remembered. Who cared. Who believed that wealth was a responsibility, not a reward. Who understood that having enough meant making sure others had enough too. Maria had 1 hour left. She thought about using it to buy something for herself. New clothes. Furniture. Something to remember this day by. But that felt wrong. Empty. Like she would be betraying something essential about who she was. Instead, she did something different. She wrote a letter. Not to Jonathan. But to Eli and Grace. A letter for them to read when they were older. When they would understand what had happened. What she had done. Why it mattered. Dear Eli and Grace, by the time you read this, you'll be grown. You'll have lived enough life to understand that sometimes, the universe gives you tests. Not the kind you take in school, but the kind that reveal who you really are. When I was 38 years old, a stranger gave me unlimited access to wealth for 24 hours. He wanted to see what I would do. What I would become. I want you to know what I chose. I chose to remember where I came from. To honor your father's memory by being generous the way he was generous. To use temporary power to create lasting change. I paid for medical care we had needed for years. I helped people who were where I had been. I invested in your futures and in my own. And I did it all without losing sight of what matters. Not the money. But the choices. This is the lesson I want you to carry with you. Character isn't about what you have. It's about what you do when you have the power to choose. Choose kindness. Choose generosity. Choose to see people who society has made invisible. Choose to remember that dignity is a right, not a privilege. I love you both more than words can express. And I'm so proud to be your mother. Love, Mom. She sealed the letter. Put it in a drawer with important documents. Someday, years from now, they would find it and understand. At 6:45, Maria sat on her couch. The black card in her hand. 2 minutes left. She had spent $371,000. She had changed lives. Including her own. But there was still money she hadn't used. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably. Maybe more. She could use these last 2 minutes to spend it all. To rack up charges. To take everything she could. But she didn't. Because that wasn't who she was. At 6:47, the card deactivated. Maria set it on the coffee table. And she smiled. Not because she had won something. But because she had proven something. To Jonathan. To herself. To the universe. She had proven that poverty doesn't corrupt character. That desperation doesn't erase dignity. That people aren't defined by their circumstances, but by how they navigate them. She had proven that when you give someone who has been invisible the power to be seen, they don't abuse it. They use it to help others become visible too. Jonathan sat in his penthouse at 6:47, watching the clock. The card had just deactivated. He pulled up his account. Began scrolling through the transactions. He had expected to see luxury purchases. Designer clothes. Expensive jewelry. Maybe a car. Maybe a spontaneous trip somewhere. He had given this same test to 3 other people over the past year. A struggling artist who had spent it all on studio space and supplies for himself. A graduate student drowning in debt who had paid off her loans and bought a new laptop. A single father who had bought a truck and tools to start a contracting business. All reasonable. All understandable. All focused primarily on themselves. But Maria's transactions were different. Pediatric clinic. Dental office. Rent payment to a landlord. Hardware store. Food bank. Women's shelter. Cash withdrawals from ATMs in the poorest part of the city. A donation to a school. Another to a library. Another to a community center. A payment to a cleaning company with a note about employee raises. College savings accounts. An online university. Jonathan's hand started to shake. He kept scrolling. More donations. More acts of kindness. More evidence of someone who had been given everything and chosen to give it away. The total spent, $371,000. Out of unlimited access. She had stopped. Voluntarily. Left money unspent. Jonathan's throat tightened. His eyes blurred with tears. Because Maria had done something he had never seen before. She had proven that character doesn't change when you gain power. It reveals who you already were. And Maria, invisible and exhausted and struggling, had always been extraordinary. Jonathan kept scrolling. Looking for something selfish. Something indulgent. Something that would confirm his cynical view that everyone, when given the chance, takes care of themselves first. But there was nothing. Every single purchase was either necessary, medical care, rent, or generous, donations, helping others. She had bought her children glasses. She had fixed her neighbor's ceiling. She had given money to a waitress working a double shift. She had invested in her community. And then, at the end, with hours still remaining and unlimited funds still available, she had simply stopped. As if to say, I have enough. As if to say, someone else might need this more. Jonathan wept. Not quietly. Not politely. But like a man finally understanding what wealth was supposed to mean. He had spent his entire life accumulating money. Building empires. Winning. And he had missed the point entirely. Wealth wasn't about having. It was about doing. It was about using resources to create dignity, to solve problems, to lift people up. Maria, with nothing, understood this better than he ever had. His phone rang. It was his assistant. Mr. Hale. There's an envelope here for you. It was delivered this morning. Bring it up, he said, his voice hoarse. The envelope arrived. Inside was the black card. And beneath it, a handwritten note on notebook paper. Jonathan picked it up with trembling hands. The handwriting was neat. Careful. The kind of handwriting that belonged to someone who took care with everything they did. He read, "Dear Jonathan, I didn't use it all. I spent $371,000 on things that mattered. Medical care for my children. Repairs to my home and my neighbors' homes. Donations to organizations that helped me when I had nothing. Direct aid to people who are where I was. Investment in my children's education and my own. I could have spent more. I could have emptied your account. But that's not who I am. And this experiment, I think, wasn't really about the money. It was about what the money revealed. I hope I showed you what you were looking for. I hope I proved that people who have nothing aren't waiting to take everything. Most of us just want enough. And when we get it, when we finally have enough to breathe, we remember the people who are still drowning. Thank you for reminding me that I'm still human. That I'm still capable of choosing kindness over survival. That having power, even temporary power, doesn't have to corrupt. I'm returning the card. And I'm returning it with gratitude. Not for the money, though that changed my life. But for the reminder that I'm more than my circumstances. That my character isn't defined by what I lack, but by what I do when I have the chance to choose. Sincerely, Maria Thompson. Jonathan read the note 3 times. Then a 4th. By the 5th reading, he had made a decision. This couldn't end here. Maria had changed his life more profoundly than she could possibly know. She had given him something he thought he'd lost. Purpose. Understanding. A reason to have wealth beyond simply having it. He called his lawyer. I need you to set up a meeting. And I need you to draft some documents. Today. Right now. What kind of documents, sir? A trust. A foundation. A scholarship fund. And a real estate transfer. I'll explain when you get here. Just get here. Now. Jonathan stood up. Walked to his window. Looked out at the city waking up below him. Millions of people. Most of them struggling. Most of them invisible. Most of them doing the best they could with what they had. And somewhere out there was Maria, probably making breakfast for her kids, getting ready for another day of work, thinking this impossible 24 hours was over. But it wasn't over. For Maria, it was just beginning. 3 days later, Maria received a phone call from a lawyer. She almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant creditors or scammers. But something made her pick up. Ms. Thompson. This is Robert Chen from Chen and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of Jonathan Hale. Do you have a moment? Maria's heart skipped. Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong with the card? No, ma'am. Quite the opposite. Mr. Hale would like to meet with you. Would you be available tomorrow afternoon? 2 o'clock. Maria hesitated. She had returned the card. Had written her note. Had assumed that was the end. I suppose so. Where? Mr. Hale will send a car for you. If you could provide your address, we'll arrange pickup at 1:30. Maria gave her address, confused and slightly nervous. The next day, a black car arrived exactly at 1:30. The driver was polite, professional. Opened the door for her. Maria, wearing her nicest dress, which wasn't very nice, got in. They drove to Jonathan's office building. 52 stories of glass and steel in the heart of downtown. Maria had cleaned buildings like this. Had been invisible in spaces like this. But she had never been a guest. She was escorted to the top floor. Jonathan's assistant, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, offered her water, coffee, anything she needed. Maria accepted water just to have something to do with her hands. Then Jonathan appeared. He looked different than he had at the cafe. Less guarded. More open. His eyes were red, like he hadn't been sleeping. Maria. Thank you for coming. He gestured to his office. She followed him in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Expensive art on the walls. Furniture that probably cost more than her annual income. But Jonathan didn't sit behind his impressive desk. He sat in one of the chairs by the window and gestured for Maria to sit across from him. "I read your note," he said. "I reviewed every transaction. And I need you to know something. You changed my life." Maria didn't know what to say to that. "I just did what felt right." "Exactly," Jonathan said. "That's the point. You did what felt right. Not what felt good, not what felt easy, but what felt right. Do you understand how rare that is? How extraordinary?" Maria shook her head. "I don't think it's extraordinary. I think it's just being human." "That's where you're wrong," Jonathan said gently. "I've given this test to other people. People who were struggling, who needed help. And every single one of them spent the money primarily on themselves. Which is understandable. Which I don't judge. But you didn't. You spent it on everyone but yourself." "That's not true," Maria protested. "I paid for my education. I set up college funds for my kids. I did things for myself." "You invested in your ability to help others," Jonathan corrected. "You became a teacher so you could educate children. You secured your children's futures so they wouldn't struggle the way you have. Even your self-care was in service of something larger. Maria, you proved something I had stopped believing. That people are fundamentally good. That poverty doesn't corrupt. That given the opportunity, most people want to help, not hurt. You gave me hope. And I want to give you something in return." He handed her a folder. Maria opened it, confused. Inside were legal documents. She didn't understand most of the language. But certain phrases jumped out. Full ownership. No mortgage. Deed transferred to Maria Thompson. She looked up at Jonathan. "I don't understand." "I bought you a house," Jonathan said simply. "A real house. 3 bedrooms. A yard. In a good neighborhood with good schools. It's yours. Completely. No strings attached." Maria's hands started shaking. "I can't accept this. This is too much." "You can," Jonathan said. "And you should. Because you deserve stability. Your children deserve stability. And this is my way of saying thank you for teaching me something I should have learned decades ago." He handed her another folder. "This is a trust fund. For Eli and Grace. It will cover their full education, from now through college. Whatever they want to study. Wherever they want to go. They'll never have to worry about affording it." Maria was crying now. Couldn't stop crying. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you showed me what wealth is actually for," Jonathan said, his own voice breaking. "It's not for accumulating. It's not for displaying. It's not even for securing your own comfort. It's for creating dignity. For repairing harm. For giving people who have been invisible the chance to be seen. You understood that instinctively. I had to learn it from you." He handed her a third folder. "And this is a job offer. I'm starting a foundation. The Hail Humanity Fund. Its mission is to help people like you. People who are working themselves to death and barely surviving. People who fall through the cracks of our broken systems. I want you to direct it. To make decisions about who gets help and how. Because you understand what these people need better than I ever could." Maria stared at the folders in her lap. At the documents that represented a completely different life. A life where she wasn't drowning. Where her children had opportunities. Where she had purpose beyond mere survival. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Jonathan said. "Say you'll take the house. Say you'll direct the foundation. Say you'll let me learn from you how to use wealth the way it was meant to be used. Maria looked up at him. This billionaire who had everything but had felt empty. Who had given her a test but had ended up being tested himself. Who had wealth but was seeking meaning. I'll do it, she said. But on one condition. Name it. You have to be involved. Really involved. Not just writing checks, but meeting the people we help. Hearing their stories. Understanding their lives. Because this foundation, if it's going to work, can't just be about money. It has to be about dignity. About seeing people. And you need to learn how to see them. Jonathan nodded. I will. I promise. And he kept that promise. Over the next 6 months, the foundation took shape. They rented office space. Hired staff. Created programs. Rent assistance. Medical care. Job training. Childcare. Emergency funds for families facing crisis. They didn't ask for worthiness. Didn't require proof of deserving. They simply helped. Quietly. With dignity. Maria became the face of the foundation. She interviewed applicants. Made decisions about funding. Told her own story to help others feel less alone. And Jonathan showed up. Every week, he spent a day at the foundation. Meeting people. Hearing stories. Writing checks, yes, but also listening. Really listening. He met a veteran who had been living in his car. They found him housing and helped him get treatment for PTSD. He met a teenager aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. They set him up with an apartment and job training. He met a woman who reminded him of Catherine, his late wife. She was battling cancer and couldn't afford treatment. They paid for everything. Every encounter changed him. Softened him. Reminded him that behind every statistic about poverty was a human being with dignity and dreams and the capacity for extraordinary goodness if just given the chance. Maria thrived in her new role. She moved her family into the house Jonathan had bought. Eli and Grace each got their own bedroom. There was a yard where they could play. A kitchen with new appliances. A sense of permanence they had never had before. She enrolled in her teaching program. Worked on it at night, after the kids were asleep. It was hard. Exhausting. But it was a different kind of exhaustion. The kind that came from building something, not from barely surviving. She graduated 2 years later. Got her teaching certification. And began teaching at the same elementary school Eli and Grace attended. She taught 3rd grade. Every year, she had students who reminded her of her own children. Students whose clothes were worn. Whose stomachs were empty. Whose parents were exhausted. She saw them. Learned their names. Made sure they knew they mattered. And when she could, when she noticed a child squinting at the board or showing up without lunch, she quietly used foundation resources to help. Glasses. Food. School supplies. Whatever was needed. She never embarrassed them. Never made them feel like charity cases. She just helped. The way Sharon at the food bank had helped her. The way Jonathan had helped her. The way humans are supposed to help each other. Jonathan's relationship with his son began to heal. It took time. Years, actually. But slowly, through therapy and honest conversations and Jonathan's willingness to admit he had been wrong about so many things, they rebuilt their connection. Michael came to visit the foundation one day. Saw what his father was doing. Saw how he had changed. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said. It was the first time he had said those words in a decade. Jonathan cried. Maria, watching from across the room, smiled. Because she understood that healing happens slowly. That redemption is possible. That people can change if they're willing to do the work. Years later, Jonathan would say in an interview, "I spent my entire life building wealth. But I didn't understand what it was for until a single mother taught me. She showed me that wealth isn't about power. It's about responsibility. It's about using what you have to create dignity for others. That's the only kind of success that actually matters." The interviewer asked, "Do you regret anything about your previous life? About how you made your money?" Jonathan thought for a long moment. "I regret not learning this lesson sooner. I regret all the years I spent focused on accumulation instead of contribution. But I'm grateful I learned it at all. Because Maria showed me something I had forgotten. That we're all connected. That another person's suffering diminishes us all. And that having enough means making sure others have enough too." 5 years after that impossible 24 hours, the Hail Humanity Fund had helped over 10,000 families. They had paid medical bills, covered rent, provided job training, funded education, offered childcare, given people the breathing room they needed to escape poverty. But more than the numbers, more than the money, was the philosophy that guided everything they did. Dignity first. No judgment. No worthiness tests. No proving that you deserved help. Just help. Freely given. With respect. Maria often thought about that day. About the black card. About the choice she had made. She could have taken everything. Could have secured her own future and never thought about anyone else. No one would have blamed her. She had earned the right to be selfish. But she hadn't been. Because that wasn't who she was. And that choice, that reflection of character, had changed everything. Not just for her. But for Jonathan. For the thousands of people the foundation helped. For everyone who witnessed what was possible when wealth met conscience. Eli was 15 now. Grace was 12. They were good kids. Thoughtful kids. Maria had told them the story. About the card. About Jonathan. About the choice she made. They understood, in the way children understand important things even before they have the language to articulate why those things matter. "Mom," Eli asked one day, "when you had the card, weren't you scared?" "Of what?" "That you'd never get another chance. That you should take everything you could because you might never have money again." Maria thought about this. "I was scared," she admitted. "But more than being scared of not having enough, I was scared of losing who I was. Because poverty can take a lot of things from you. Your home. Your security. Your comfort. But it can't take your character. That's the only thing you really control. And I wasn't going to let temporary power turn me into someone I didn't recognize." Eli nodded slowly. "That makes sense. Does it?" Maria asked. "Because when you're older, you're going to face these kinds of choices too. Maybe not with a credit card, but with other kinds of power. And I want you to remember that who you are when you have power is who you really are. Everything else is just circumstances." Grace, listening from the doorway, came and sat beside her mother. "Are we rich now?" It was an innocent question. But complicated. "We're comfortable," Maria said carefully. "We have enough. We have security. But more importantly, we have purpose. And we remember where we came from. That's more valuable than any amount of money. I want to help people when I grow up," Grace said. "Like you and Mr. Jonathan do." Maria hugged her daughter. "Then you will. And you'll be amazing at it." Jonathan, now 67, had changed in ways that couldn't be measured by bank statements or business deals. He was quieter. More thoughtful. He spent less time in boardrooms and more time at the foundation. He had sold 2 of his 3 homes. Donated the proceeds to various causes. He lived more simply now. Not out of necessity, but out of choice. Because he had learned that accumulation for its own sake was empty. That the things that actually mattered, connection, purpose, dignity, couldn't be bought. He often thought about that rainy day when he had stopped to help Maria pick up her groceries. How easily he could have walked past like everyone else. How close he had come to missing the most important lesson of his life. One afternoon, he was at the foundation when a young woman came in. She was 23, recently graduated from college, drowning in debt. She had applied for assistance with her student loans. Maria interviewed her. Listened to her story. Approved emergency funding to cover 6 months of payments while the young woman found stable employment. After the woman left, grateful and crying, Jonathan turned to Maria. "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "That day. Giving away the money instead of keeping it for yourself. Do you ever wish you had made different choices?" Maria thought about this. It wasn't the first time someone had asked. "No," she said finally. "Because keeping it all would have made me comfortable. But giving it away made me whole. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Comfort is about having enough for yourself. Wholeness is about being part of something larger. About understanding that your well-being is tied to everyone else's well-being. I could have had comfort. But I chose wholeness. And I've never regretted it." Jonathan smiled. "That's why this works. That's why the foundation matters. Because you understand something most people spend their whole lives missing." "What's that?" "That we're not separate. That another person's pain is our pain. That another person's dignity is our dignity. That we rise together or we don't rise at all." Maria nodded. "My husband used to say something similar. He said that the measure of a society isn't how it treats its most successful people. It's how it treats its most vulnerable people. And if we're not taking care of the vulnerable, then we've failed. All of us." He sounds like he was a wise man. "He was," Maria said softly. "And I think he'd be proud of what we're doing here. Of what that impossible day led to." "I know I'm proud," Jonathan said. "Proud of you. And grateful. You saved my life, Maria. In every way a person can be saved." "You saved mine too," Maria replied. "We saved each other. That's how it's supposed to work." The foundation's impact rippled outward in ways neither Maria nor Jonathan had anticipated. The families they helped began helping others. A single father they had assisted with rent went on to start a community garden that fed dozens of families. A woman they had helped escape an abusive relationship became a domestic violence counselor. A teenager they had given a scholarship to became a doctor and returned to practice in underserved communities. Each act of kindness multiplied. Each person helped became someone who helped others. And slowly, quietly, a different kind of economy emerged. Not based on accumulation, but on circulation. Not based on hoarding, but on sharing. It wasn't large scale. It wasn't going to change the entire system. But it was real. And it mattered. Maria received letters. Hundreds of them. From people the foundation had helped. From people who had heard about what she had done with the card and were inspired. From people who wanted to share their own stories of struggle and resilience. She read every single one. Responded when she could. Each letter reminded her why this work mattered. Why that 24 hours had been so significant. One letter came from Denise, the waitress Maria had given money to at the diner 5 years earlier. "Dear Maria, I don't know if you remember me. I was working a double shift when you gave me $1,000 and told me to take a day off. I want you to know what happened after that. I paid my rent. I took 2 days off, my first days off in 3 months. I slept. I cried. I remembered what it felt like to be human instead of just a function. And then I made a decision. I went back to school. I had dropped out of nursing school 10 years earlier because I couldn't afford it. But your kindness, your generosity, reminded me that I had dreams once. That I was more than my circumstances. I finished my degree last month. I'm a registered nurse now. I work in an emergency room. And every single day, when I see someone come in scared and alone, I think about you. About how you saw me when I was invisible. How you helped me when you didn't have to. I try to be that person for others now. I try to see people the way you saw me. Thank you for giving me more than money. Thank you for giving me back myself. With gratitude, Denise. Maria cried when she read it. Showed it to Jonathan. This is what it's about, she said. Not the big donations or the foundation or the recognition. This. One person seeing another person and choosing to help. That's what changes the world. Jonathan framed the letter. Hung it in his office. Looked at it whenever he forgot why he was doing this work. Why it mattered. The foundation's model began to attract attention. Other wealthy individuals reached out. Wanted to replicate it. Wanted to understand how it worked. Jonathan was cautious about this. He had seen too many charitable efforts that were really about the giver's ego. About tax breaks and publicity and feeling good about oneself without actually making systemic change. But some people were genuine. Some people really wanted to learn. So Maria and Jonathan began consulting. Teaching others how to build foundations based on dignity. How to give without judgment. How to see people instead of problems. One billionaire, a tech entrepreneur named David Chen, flew across the country to meet with them. I read about what you did, he said to Maria. About the card. And it challenged everything I thought I knew about poverty and human nature. I want to do something similar. I want to change how I use my wealth. Maria looked at him carefully. Why? What do you hope to get from it? He thought about this. Honestly? Meaning. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I don't have purpose. I don't have connection. I don't feel like my life matters beyond the numbers in my bank account. Maria nodded. Then you're ready. Because this work isn't about you. It's about them. The people you help. And if you can accept that, if you can be okay with being in service instead of in charge, then you'll be good at this. David started his own foundation. Modeled it on theirs. Focused on dignity, not charity. On seeing people, not solving problems. And he found what Jonathan had found. That giving with purpose was more fulfilling than accumulating without it. 7 years after that impossible day, Maria received a phone call that changed everything again. It was from a lawyer she didn't know. Ms. Thompson. This is Margaret Williams from Williams & Associates. I'm handling the estate of Michael Callahan. I believe you knew him as your former landlord. Maria's heart sank. Mr. Callahan. The kind man who had never evicted her when she couldn't pay rent. Who had understood her struggle because he had a daughter her age. He passed away. Yes, ma'am. 2 weeks ago. Peacefully, in his sleep. I'm calling because you're named in his will. Maria was confused. I am. Yes. Mr. Callahan left you his building. The one you used to live in. He wanted you to have it. There's a letter accompanying the bequest. I'll send everything to your address on file. The documents arrived 3 days later. Maria opened the letter with shaking hands. Dear Maria, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't be too sad. I lived a good long life, and I'm ready to see my Mary again. I'm leaving you my building. Not because I pity you, but because I trust you. You're the only person I know who understands what it's like to need affordable housing. Who understands that a home isn't just an investment property, but someone's life, someone's stability, someone's chance. I'm asking you to keep the rents affordable. To be the kind of landlord I tried to be. To see the tenants as people, not income streams. I know you will. You've always seen people. Even when the world made you invisible, you never stopped seeing others. Thank you for paying off your back rent that day. Thank you for fixing Mrs. Chen's ceiling and Mr. Patterson's window. I know that was you, even though you never said anything. Thank you for being the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it. Take care of the building. Take care of the people in it. And don't let anyone tell you that kindness is weakness. It's the strongest thing any of us can offer. With admiration, Michael Callahan. Maria sat on her couch and sobbed. For Mr. Callahan. For his trust in her. For the weight of responsibility he had placed on her shoulders. For the continued evidence that kindness rippled outward in ways you could never predict. She showed the letter to Jonathan. I don't know if I can do this. Managing a building. Being a landlord. That's not what I know how to do. You know how to see people, Jonathan said. You know how to treat them with dignity. That's all being a good landlord requires. Everything else you can learn. So Maria became a landlord. She kept the rents exactly where Mr. Callahan had set them. Below market rate. Affordable for people who were struggling. She made repairs promptly. She was understanding when people were late on rent. She created a community fund, drawn from a portion of the rent income, that tenants could apply to when they faced emergencies. She treated the building the way Mr. Callahan had treated it. As a home for people, not an investment property. The building became known as a safe place. A rare place. Where landlords didn't exploit tenants. Where housing was treated as a human right, not a commodity. People wanted to live there. But Maria didn't raise the rents just because demand was high. She kept them affordable. Because that's what Mr. Callahan had asked her to do. Because that's who she was. One day, a young single mother applied for an apartment in the building. Her name was Jennifer. She had 2 kids, ages 8 and 5. Her husband had left her. She was working 2 jobs. She was exhausted and scared and trying her best. Maria interviewed her. Saw herself 7 years earlier. Saw the exhaustion. The determination. The quiet dignity of someone who refused to give up. She approved Jennifer's application immediately. Gave her the best apartment in the building. A 2-bedroom with good light and a view of the park. When Jennifer asked about the security deposit, Maria waived it. Just pay your rent when you can. And if you can't, talk to me. We'll figure it out. Jennifer cried. Why are you being so kind to me? Maria smiled. Because someone was kind to me once. And it saved my life. Now I'm passing it forward. She told Jennifer about the card. About Jonathan. About Mr. Callahan. About how one act of kindness had created a chain of kindness that was still growing. You're part of that chain now, Maria said. Someday, when you're in a position to help someone, you'll do it. And they'll help someone else. That's how we change the world. Not with grand gestures, but with small acts of kindness that ripple outward forever. 10 years after the card, Maria and Jonathan sat together in the foundation office. It was late. Everyone else had gone home. They were reviewing applications, deciding who to help next. There was always someone who needed help. Always. Do you ever get tired? Jonathan asked. Of this work. Of always seeing need. Maria thought about this. Sometimes. But then I remember that the alternative is not seeing it. And not seeing it is how we got here in the first place. How we created a world where people fall through cracks. So I'd rather be tired from seeing than rested from ignoring. Jonathan nodded. I think about that day all the time. The day I gave you the card. I thought I was testing you. But you were testing me. How so? You were testing whether I could handle the truth. Whether I could accept that I had been wrong about everything. Whether I could change. And I'm still not sure I passed that test. You're here, aren't you? Maria said. You're doing the work. You're showing up. That's passing the test. But I keep thinking about all the years I wasted. All the years I spent accumulating wealth without understanding what it was for. All the people I didn't help because I didn't see them. You can't change the past, Maria said gently. None of us can. But you can change the future. And you are. Every day, you're changing someone's future. That has to count for something. Does it balance out? Jonathan asked. All the good we're doing now versus all the harm I did before. Not intentional harm, but harm through neglect. Through not seeing people. Through participating in systems that kept people trapped. Maria was quiet for a long moment. I don't think it's about balancing out. I think it's about transformation. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. You've been transformed by this work, by seeing people, by understanding suffering. And that transformation is ongoing. You're not trying to balance a scale. You're trying to become someone new. Someone better. And you are. Because of you, Jonathan said. Because you showed me. Because we showed each other, Maria corrected. You gave me opportunity. I gave you perspective. Neither of us could have done this alone. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jonathan asked, what do you think would have happened if I had given the card to someone else? Someone who made different choices. Then you would have learned a different lesson, Maria said. Maybe a more cynical lesson. Maybe you would have concluded that people are selfish, that poverty corrupts, that giving people opportunity just leads to exploitation. And you would have gone back to your old life, confirmed in your assumptions. I'm glad I gave it to you, Jonathan said. I'm glad I stopped that day in the rain. Me too, Maria said. Because it changed both our lives. And through changing our lives, it changed hundreds of other lives. Thousands, probably. That's the thing about kindness. You never know where it ends. Eli graduated from high school at the top of his class. He had scholarship offers from several prestigious universities. On graduation day, he gave a speech as valedictorian. Maria and Jonathan sat in the audience, watching this young man who had been 9 years old when his life changed. I grew up poor, Eli said from the podium. My mom worked 2 jobs. We struggled. But I never felt poor. You know why? Because my mom taught me that wealth isn't about what you have. It's about who you are. She taught me to see people. To help people. To understand that we're all connected. And 10 years ago, someone saw my mom. Someone helped her. And that act of kindness changed everything. Not just for us, but for thousands of people. Because kindness multiplies. Because generosity ripples outward. Because when you help someone, you're not just changing their life. You're changing all the lives they'll touch. I'm going to college to study social work. I want to continue the work my mom started. I want to help people the way she helped people. The way someone once helped her. Because that's what we're here for. Not to accumulate. Not to compete. But to lift each other up. Thank you. The auditorium erupted in applause. Maria was crying. Jonathan was crying. Even Grace, now 13 and sitting beside them, was crying. After the ceremony, Eli hugged his mother. I meant every word, Mom. You taught me everything that matters. Grace went down a different path. She became interested in art, like Jonathan's son Michael. She painted. Drew. Created worlds on canvas. Her work was beautiful. Haunting. Full of emotion. When she was 16, she had her first gallery show. All the proceeds went to the foundation. I don't need the money, she explained. I have everything I need. But someone else doesn't. So this is how I can help. Through my art. Maria watched her children become exactly who they were meant to be. Not because they had money, but because they had been taught what mattered. They had been shown, through example, that character was more important than comfort. That seeing people was more important than being seen. That giving was more fulfilling than taking. The lessons Maria had learned during those 24 hours with the card, she had passed on to her children. And they were passing them on to others. The ripple continued. Jonathan's son, Michael, got married. Had children of his own. Brought them to the foundation. I want them to understand, he told his father. I want them to see what really matters. I don't want them to make the mistakes I made, thinking that success was about money and status. I want them to know what you learned. What Maria taught you. Jonathan's grandchildren, ages 7 and 5, spent one afternoon a month at the foundation. They helped sort donated clothes. They drew pictures for the families who came in for help. They met people who were struggling. And slowly, they learned. They learned that not everyone had what they had. That not everyone was as fortunate. That privilege came with responsibility. They were being raised differently than Jonathan had raised Michael. With awareness. With compassion. With an understanding that wealth was meant to be shared, not hoarded. 15 years after the card, a journalist approached Maria. She wanted to write a story. Not about the money. But about what the money had revealed. About how one act of kindness had created a chain reaction that was still ongoing. Maria was hesitant. She had never wanted publicity. Had never wanted to be seen as special. But the journalist was persistent. People need to hear this story. Not to glorify you, but to challenge them. To make them think about what they would do. To inspire them to see the invisible people in their own lives. Finally, Maria agreed. But on one condition. You tell the whole story. Not just my part. Jonathan's part. Mr. Callahan's part. Denise's part. Every person who was part of this chain. Because it's not about me. It's about all of us. The article was published in a major magazine. It was titled, "The Woman Who Gave It All Away, What One Single Mother's Choice Reveals About Character, Wealth, and Human Nature." It went viral. Millions of people read it. Discussed it. Debated it. Some people said Maria was foolish. That she should have kept the money. That she had squandered an opportunity. Others said she was extraordinary. That she had proven something important about human goodness. Most people fell somewhere in between. They were moved by the story. Challenged by it. Forced to ask themselves, what would I have done? The article sparked a movement. People started calling it the 24-hour challenge. Wealthy individuals began committing to give away significant amounts of money in 24 hours, following Maria's model. Not to random purchases, but to meaningful causes. To people in need. To organizations doing important work. It became a trend. Then a practice. Then a philosophy. Give meaningfully. Give with dignity. Give in ways that create ripple effects. Some people did it genuinely. Others did it for publicity. But even the ones who did it for publicity ended up creating real change. Money flowed to people who needed it. Lives were transformed. And slowly, a different conversation began to emerge in society. Not about how to accumulate wealth. But about how to use it. Not about who deserves to be poor. But about why poverty exists in a world with so much abundance. Not about individual responsibility. But about collective responsibility. The conversation was still young. Still fragile. Still easily drowned out by louder voices arguing for the status quo. But it was happening. And it started because of Maria. Because of one woman's choice on one impossible day. Maria received thousands of messages. From people who were inspired. From people who were angry. From people who were confused. She read as many as she could. Responded when possible. But mostly, she just kept doing the work. Running the foundation. Managing the building. Teaching her third-grade class. Seeing people. Helping people. Being who she had always been. One message stood out. It was from a wealthy hedge fund manager named Robert. I read your story. And it made me angry at first. Because it challenged everything I believe about economics and human nature and the way the world works. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. And eventually, I realized I was angry because you were right. I've spent my entire career extracting wealth. Moving money from one place to another. Creating nothing of value. Helping no one. And I've become rich doing it. But I'm miserable. I can't remember the last time I felt like my life mattered. Like I was contributing something. Like I was more than just a function in a machine that makes rich people richer. I don't know if I can change. I don't know if I'm brave enough to do what you did. But I want to try. Can you help me? Maria wrote back. Yes. Come visit the foundation. Meet the people we help. Hear their stories. And then decide what you want to do. Not what I think you should do. What you want to do. Because this only works if it comes from genuine desire to change, not from guilt or obligation. Robert came. Spent a week at the foundation. Met families. Heard stories. Saw poverty up close for the first time in his privileged life. And he broke. Not dramatically. But quietly. A slow crumbling of assumptions and defenses and the armor he had built around his conscience. By the end of the week, he was crying in Maria's office. I had no idea. I've spent my whole life not seeing this. Not seeing them. How did I not see? Because you weren't looking, Maria said gently. Because our society is designed to hide poverty from wealthy people. To make sure you never have to confront the consequences of inequality. But now you see. Now you can't unsee. So what are you going to do about it? Robert quit his job. Started his own foundation. Modeled on Maria and Jonathan's. He wasn't perfect at it. Made mistakes. Sometimes slipped back into old patterns of thinking. But he kept trying. Kept showing up. Kept learning to see people instead of problems. He was one of dozens. Then hundreds. Then thousands. People who read Maria's story and were changed by it. Who decided to use their wealth differently. To see people differently. To be different. The ripple continued. 20 years after the card, Maria turned 58. The same age Jonathan had been when they first met. She gathered her family for dinner. Eli was 29 now. A social worker, just like he had said he would be. Married to a teacher. They had a daughter, Maria's first grandchild, named Catherine after Jonathan's late wife. Grace was 26. An artist and activist. Using her art to raise awareness about poverty and inequality. Still giving all her proceeds to the foundation. Jonathan was there too. Now 82. Still sharp. Still involved. Still showing up every week. His son Michael and grandchildren joined them. As did several people from the foundation. People Maria and Jonathan had helped over the years who had become friends. Family. They sat around a large table. Shared food. Told stories. Laughed. It was everything Maria had dreamed of 20 years ago. Not wealth. But connection. Not luxury. But love. Not power. But purpose. After dinner, Jonathan stood up. Tapped his glass. I want to say something. 20 years ago, I met a woman in the rain. She dropped her groceries. And I stopped to help. It was the smallest gesture. Took maybe 5 minutes. But it changed my life completely. Because that woman, Maria, taught me something I had spent 62 years not understanding. She taught me what wealth is actually for. He paused. Looked at Maria. I gave you a test. I gave you unlimited access to my money for 24 hours. I wanted to see what you would do. If I'm honest, I was expecting you to be selfish. I was expecting you to prove my cynical view of human nature. That people, when given the chance, take care of themselves first. But you didn't. You took care of everyone else. And in doing so, you showed me that my cynicism was just a defense mechanism. A way to justify my own selfishness. You broke that. You showed me that people are fundamentally good. That poverty doesn't corrupt character. That given the opportunity, most people want to help, not hurt. You saved my life, Maria. In every way that matters. You gave me purpose. You gave me connection. You gave me a reason to have wealth beyond simply having it. And I will be grateful for that until the day I die. He raised his glass. To Maria. The most extraordinary person I've ever known. Not because of what you have, but because of who you are. Everyone raised their glasses. Maria was crying. To Maria, they said in unison. Then Maria stood. I want to say something too. 20 years ago, I was invisible. I was exhausted. I was struggling. And then someone saw me. Someone stopped. Someone helped. Not because they had to. Not because I deserved it. But because they chose to see me as human. That choice changed everything. She looked at Jonathan. You gave me a test. But I didn't feel tested. I felt seen. For the first time in years, someone was paying attention to me. Not to what I could produce or what I could offer, but to who I was. And that gift, the gift of being seen, was more valuable than any amount of money. Yes, the money changed my circumstances. It paid for healthcare and education and housing. It gave me opportunities one never would have had. But the real gift was being reminded that I mattered. That my character mattered. That who I chose to be in that moment would define me more than anything I had or didn't have. I didn't give away that money out of nobility. I gave it away because it's who I am. Because I couldn't look at myself in the mirror if I had kept it all. Because I remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and I couldn't let other people stay invisible when I had the power to help them be seen. So thank you, Jonathan. For seeing me. For trusting me. For believing that someone like me, someone poor and struggling and invisible, could teach you something valuable. You didn't just change my life. You gave me the opportunity to change other people's lives. And that's the greatest gift anyone can give. She raised her glass. To Jonathan. The man who had everything but gave me the one thing I needed most. A chance. They toasted. Drank. And then Eli stood up. Can I say something? Everyone nodded. I was 9 years old when this happened. When Mr. Hale gave Mom the card. I didn't understand it then. I just knew that suddenly we could go to the doctor and I got glasses and things were different. But now, as an adult, as a father myself, I understand what really happened that day. My mom was given a test. Not just about money, but about character. About who she would be when given power. And she passed that test in a way that changed thousands of lives. But here's what I think about now. What would I do? If someone gave me unlimited money for 24 hours, what would I choose? And I think that's the question everyone should ask themselves. Not as a hypothetical. But as a real examination of character. Because we all have some amount of power. Maybe not unlimited money. But time. Attention. Skills. resources. And every day, we choose what to do with that power. Do we use it for ourselves? Or do we use it to help others? Do we see people? Or do we look away? My mom taught me that character is revealed in choices. That who you are isn't determined by your circumstances, but by what you do with whatever power you have. And I'm trying to live up to that lesson every single day. So now, I ask you. The person watching this right now. What would you have done with that card? Be honest. Would you have spent it on yourself? On your family? On strangers? Would you have given it away? Would you have kept it all? There's no right answer. But there is your answer. And that answer reveals something about who you are. About what you value. About what kind of world you want to create. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think about wealth and poverty and character differently, then do something. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories like this. Stories that challenge assumptions and inspire action. Leave a comment telling us what you would have done. Be honest. We want to know. And share this video. Because the more people who see it, the more people who are forced to confront this question, the more we can create a world where wealth means responsibility, where power means service, where seeing people is the norm instead of the exception. That's how change happens. Not through grand gestures. But through millions of small choices made by people who have decided to see each other. To help each other. To be better than the system we inherited. So what will you choose? The foundation is still operating today. Still helping families. Still seeing people. Maria is 60 now. Still teaching. Still managing the building. Still showing up. Jonathan is 82. Slowing down physically, but still sharp mentally. Still involved. Still learning. The work continues. It will continue after they're gone. Because they've built something larger than themselves. They've created a model that can be replicated. A philosophy that can be adopted. A way of seeing the world that transforms everyone it touches. Eli runs a non-profit now. Helping families experiencing homelessness. Grace's art is displayed in galleries across the country. All proceeds still go to charity. Jonathan's grandchildren are being raised with an understanding that wealth is responsibility. That privilege demands action. That seeing people is a moral obligation. The chain of kindness continues. Unbroken. Growing. Sometimes, late at night, Maria thinks about that rainy day 20 years ago. About the groceries falling. About Jonathan stopping. About the choice she made with the card. And she realizes that the most extraordinary part wasn't the money. It was the reminder that one person can make a difference. That one choice can ripple outward forever. That character matters more than circumstances. That who you are is revealed not in what you have, but in what you do when you have the power to choose. She hopes that her story, now spread across the world through articles and videos and word of mouth, will inspire others to make similar choices. To see the invisible people in their own lives. To help when they can. To understand that we're all connected. That another person's suffering diminishes all of us. That we rise together or we don't rise at all. That's the real lesson of the 24 hours. Not that Maria was extraordinary. But that goodness is ordinary. That most people, when given the chance, want to help. Want to be kind. Want to make the world better. We just need to be reminded. We need to be shown that it's possible. We need examples of people who chose dignity over comfort, who chose generosity over greed, who chose to see people instead of looking away. Maria provided that example. And now, thousands of others are providing it too. Creating their own chains of kindness. Their own ripples of generosity. Their own stories of transformation. The world is still broken. Still unequal. Still full of suffering. But it's also full of people like Maria. People who choose kindness. People who see each other. People who help. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Not to fix everything. But to start. To create momentum. To prove that another way is possible. That's what happened in those 24 hours. Not a miracle. But a revelation. A reminder of who we can be when we choose to be our best selves. When we choose character over comfort. When we choose love over fear. That's the story. That's the lesson. That's what Jonathan saw when he reviewed those transactions and wept. Not charity. But humanity. Not pity. But dignity. Not weakness. But strength. The strength to be kind in a cruel world. The strength to see people in a system designed to make them invisible. The strength to give when you have nothing. Because that's what Maria did. She had nothing. And she gave everything. And in giving everything, she gained everything that actually mattered. Purpose. Connection. Dignity. Love. That's what wealth is really for. Not to accumulate. But to share. Not to hoard. But to circulate. Not to separate us. But to connect us. Maria understood this instinctively. Jonathan had to learn it. And now, through their story, millions of others are learning it too. The ripple continues. And it will continue long after they're gone. Because good stories, true stories, stories that reveal something essential about human nature, never really end. They just keep going. Touching more lives. Inspiring more people. Creating more ripples. Forever. 20 years after a billionaire gave his credit card to a poor single mother for 24 hours, the world is different. Not completely. Not perfectly. But meaningfully. Because of one woman's choice. Because of one man's willingness to learn. Because of thousands of people who heard their story and decided to do something with their own power, whatever that power might be. The card is framed now. Hanging in the foundation office. A reminder. Not of money. But of choice. Not of wealth. But of character. Not of what Maria had. But of who she was. And underneath it, a plaque with a quote. The final words Maria wrote in her letter to Jonathan all those years ago. Thank you for reminding me that I'm still human. That's what this was always about. Not money. But humanity. Not power. But dignity. Not charity. But connection. Two people, from completely different worlds, reminded each other that they were human. That they mattered. That their choices defined them more than their circumstances. And that reminder changed everything. For them. For thousands of others. And maybe, if you're still watching, for you too. Because the question remains. What would you do? Not with a credit card. But with whatever power you have right now. With your time. Your attention. Your resources. Your kindness. Who will you see today that everyone else ignores? Who will you help when you don't have to? What will you do with the power you have, knowing that every choice reveals your character? That's the real test. Not 24 hours with unlimited money. But every day with whatever you have. And the answer to that question, the honest answer, determines not just who you are, but what kind of world we create together. Choose wisely. Choose kindly. Choose to see people. Because 20 years from now, someone might be telling your story. And the question will be, what did your choices reveal? Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the end. And thank you for being part of this conversation. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this story if it moved you. And most importantly, go out and create your own story of kindness. Because that's how the world changes. One choice at a time. One person at a time. One act of kindness that ripples outward forever.